Hello and welcome back guys to another one of my videos and my review of The Gifted, episode 4 of season 3. So the Easter egg count on this episode of the season is really low, the Marvel comic book Easter eggs, compared to the past few episodes, especially last week's episode, which had a ton of them. The episode was also taking a page out of the Legion book by mentioning the Slanewood institution and then introducing us to it, kind of like the Clockwork Psychiatric Institution. The premise here is pretty similar, if not really almost the same, but the whole Lanewood situation is not really just limited to this one page out of the Legion book, because there's a lot more to it. There's this one big or major Easter egg on this episode. So number one, we get a description made by Blink to this place. It isn't really a psychiatric institution for mutants, but rather a prison for them. So they find a mutant, they claim he or she are mentally unstable, and they throw them in there to imprison them. And it is not a surprise over here that we get more of an insight into the past of Lorna, because Lorna was imprisoned in Lanewood, and Lorna is probably not so happy about it. But the mention of Lorna spending so much time over there kind of comes with the first concealed Easter egg on this episode, and the major one at that. In the words of Thunderbird, some old man made a call that got her out of there, and word has it that he was her birth father, so that's kind of a concealed reference to Magneto, because we know Magneto is actually Lorna's father. But obviously though, this show is pretty careful when they plan these sort of Easter eggs along the way, when they kind of plug in these little references. Now don't get me wrong, they did make it abundantly clear when they did state on the finale of the first season that her father was a member of the Hellfire Club. When they started talking about him like this god amongst the Hellfire Club, that makes him Magneto without doubt, but they still don't want to mention the name. I think that Fox is pretty hesitant when it comes to mixing up the movie world and the TV world. Marvel might have an input on this, because now that the deal between Fox and Disney has been measured against antitrust laws and has been approved, there is a good chance they want to keep The Gifted, but in order to do that, they might want to set it up in such a way that it does integrate with the rest of the MCU, especially that it is expected that they might want to kind of merge the X-Men universe into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or reboot it entirely. So the show is kind of giving itself that room in order to be able to integrate itself with the current X-Men universe, or integrate itself with an all-new X-Men universe that is actually part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But number two, we've got all that talk about Lauren and Andy being connected to one another, Lauren especially making all the talk about it. But we've also got the talk about their powers. Her powers alone, his powers alone, their powers together. They're kind of completely different. They can do a lot together. Now once again, all of this kind of has this Fenris Twins feel that we got on season 1, but it also does indicate that these powers are going to come into effect at some point. The repeated talk about something is always a major hint towards that something coming into that kind of effect, and the question over here is whether or not the use of their unified power is going to be a positive thing or a negative thing. Are the Inner Circle going to take Lauren? Because there was talk last week by Reva about, Lauren being someone of a huge impact on Andy. If they take her in, is that nightmare of hers going to come true? Is she actually going to be forced to use her power with Andy's, combine the powers and be one as they did on season 1? And will this union of powers have a negative impact, or are they going to end up using it for a positive impact? Number 3, we've got Caitlin Strucker going extremely dark in her attempt to get her son back. So she's pretty much pumping up that junkie with the drugs he needs. She's trying to make sure that Graf gets his fix. Graf, on the other hand, and just for the sake of covering all our bases, is no mutant out of the comics that I could personally think of. I don't think there's a Graf in the comics as well, but he is pretty much sort of a replacement for Sage on this episode. I mean, Sage is not there anymore, and he's not going to be there for long, I don't think so, but for the purpose of this episode, he is sort of her replacement. Number 4, the history with Andy gets a little bit emotional, because this is not really the first time that Caitlin was supposed to lose Andy. Andy wasn't even supposed to be born, but Caitlin fought through it. Caitlin insisted that Andy is gonna come to the world, and that just like his sister, he's gonna be great, and he's gonna be a survivor, and all of that good stuff. And the thing over here is, this piece of history is kind of our portal to understanding why Caitlin is so attached to Andy, while Reed, on the other hand, is more attached to Lauren. Number 5, those two quick showdowns, one between Lorna and John on one hand, and the other one between Lauren and Andy. Now I suppose those two showdowns were kind of installed in this episode to kind of go to prove a single point, that they are not all that redeemable, that Marcos is right, these two are believers. They are followers of Reva, and they are strong believers in what the Inner Circle wants to achieve. Right or wrong, they are believers in that. But that brings us to number 6, the marital little fight between Reed and Caitlin. It's not really a huge fight, but he kind of makes a good point. How better are we from the people we're trying to save our kids from if we're pretty much doing the same, willing to shoot up this guy, get his heart to stop, just to get Andy back? There is a lot more to that conversation as well. You saw what I saw. You saw Andy smiling over there. He's not being forced into any of it. He is a believer. He goes to prove the same thing from the very point that I just mentioned. So for the time being, Andy is a goner. He is no more that scared little kid that we met at the very beginning of Season 1 when he first discovered his powers, but he is rather someone who's chosen his cause, and right or wrong, he's gonna go with this cause to the very end, and even if he were to be redeemable, it's not now at all. Number 7, it's all about mutant rights. It's all about the mutant uprising. Hashtag mutant uprising. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time talking about this because I did talk about it on last week's video, but this is pretty much yet another reference to X-Men Revolution. We are going for the uprising, and we are going for the major revolution that Reva is planning. Remember what she said at the end of last week's episode. Let's get to work. This revolution ain't gonna start itself. Number 8, it wasn't really about the mutant rights or the mutant uprising as much as it was about this one person or one mutant that's gonna help with the mutant uprising, and we do not know who this mutant is. He or she is in the back of the Hummer in which Lorna and Andy escaped the scene, but we can rest assured that this person is gonna end up being instrumental in Reva's plan to spark a revolution all over the place. Finally though, number 9, Jace still has a moral code and he's not willing to join in with the Purifiers. In his opinion, they are extremists. However though, by the end of the episode, he's changed his mind. He's making the call and he's gonna be joining the Purifiers. So we were promised the Purifiers and we got the Purifiers, and I was thinking over the course of the entire week what that cop was all about, and I was actually thinking, is he possibly a Purifier? And he ended up being one. So Jace is not just gonna team up with some cop against the mutants, he's not gonna be joining in with the mutants, not for now at least, but at this very moment he's joining in with the enemy of everyone, every single mutant out there, the Underground, the Inner Circle, or the Morlocks. They are just out there to exterminate mutants, all of them. That being said though, I've heard some people refer to this episode as some sort of a filler episode. It wasn't really. I think this episode was more of a setup. It is setting up the rhythm and the tone with which the rest of the season is gonna work. Andy and Lorna, for starters, were pretty much hesitant over the past few weeks. He is missing Lauren and she is missing Marcos, and yeah, it kind of got pretty defined on this episode, kind of telling us who's willing to stick with which side. We also got a clear-cut definition of where Jace is going with his story arc. Better the Purifiers than him being on his own team, because that would be too much. Reed, on another note, is kind of struggling with his powers. He's going to be struggling with them for a while going forward. Caitlin is struggling with what she's willing to do to get her son back, and the fact that these things that she is willing to do are not really the perfect things, are not really the right things, are not really the Caitlin kind of things. But in all cases, hope you liked this episode, hope you liked this video, and if you did, make sure you drop it a much appreciated like. Let me know in the comments if you did like this episode, let me know if there are any Easter eggs that I might have missed, let me know if there is anything in particular about this episode that you might want to discuss. Now if you did drop this video that like, make sure you're subscribed as well and enable notifications in order to get notified of my future community posts, live streams, and reviews. And until you tune in for another video of mine, thank you so much for tuning into this one, and have a great day.